Put on a suit. Drink water. Don't drink and drive.
Game over!
Take it light. Okay?
Now you're more fluent.
He got free!
Up, Bears.
So this is really good right here. Absolutely. Let's do it.
Good morning, Maple Leaf and hockey fans. How we doing today? It is Tuesday, June the 18th, and we will have Stanley Cup Game 5 tonight in Florida. Will it be the final game? I believe it will be. Obviously, Edmonton Oilers fans, probably rightfully so, after an impressive Game 4 win, will be riding the high of that victory and optimistic that Edmonton can bring it back to the city of Edmonton for a Game 6, which, if that does happen, I think we could all agree, yeah, all bets are off at that point, right? If they can get it back to Edmonton with that crowd, knowing how that game played out in Game 4 with Edmonton winning 8-1, yeah, it could be a very different series. But that is probably more why I would be leaning towards Florida closing it up tonight and being presented with Lord Stanley. I think just based on what we've seen throughout this playoff with the Florida Panthers, the way they're coached, the way they seem prepared for every game, except for Game 4, clearly. I just think it's going to be their night tonight. I expect a huge bounce back effort, kind of similar to what we witnessed last night. If you caught Game 5 of the NBA Finals, where, you know, after a very weird, probably not anticipated Game 4 blowout, Dallas Mavericks taking Game 4 over Boston, there was probably a lot of people thinking, oh, maybe this Mavs team can maybe stretch the series, extend it to at least a Game 6 and maybe beyond. But no, the best team won. Boston took care of business. Another blowout win in an NBA Finals game. Definitely not a great series, but I'm not going to talk too much about NBA here. You guys are here for the hockey banter and chat. But yeah, I just see it kind of playing out very similarly with the Stanley Cup final tonight, where Florida just kind of probably midway through even the second period, they recognize it was not their night, talking about that Game 4 in Edmonton. And, you know, Bobrovsky obviously wasn't sharp. It just felt like any good scoring chance Edmonton had was finding its way to the back of the net. And I think Florida just, I mean, not to say they weren't trying to win the game. I think you see a lot of that narrative out there that, Florida wanted to win at home. So, you know, they didn't really care about Game 4, didn't bring their A game and all that jazz. I don't think that can hold true for any pro sports team. I don't think the Boston Celtics went into Game 4 saying, yeah, let's just kind of get some cardio tonight, fellas. We really just want to win at home, so let's let the Mavs have one. I don't think that's what happened in either the basketball or the hockey Game 4s. But, you know, there probably was a little bit of a acceptance on the Florida Panthers' part. Again, as I said, midway through maybe period 2 in Game 4, where they just recognized it was not their night. It was not their night. So I think coming back to Florida tonight, I think they're going to be raring to go and wanting to win in front of the home crowd. It would be their first Stanley Cup championship win ever. They've obviously been to 2 finals in the past. Last year, obviously, most recently, losing to Vegas in 5 games. So I think they take care of business and we get ourselves another gentleman's sweep, as they say. And I actually just found out, I think on the Jeff Merrick podcast, they were talking about it. The term gentleman's sweep is actually a basketball term. I forget the name of the gentleman who coined that phrase, but it's obviously applicable tonight. And I think Florida does take care of business. I think one thing that's more up in the air is the Conn Smythe winner. there's a lot of talk that based on how Bobrovsky played in Game 4, he may have conceded or he may have lost the Conn Smythe, or in terms of being the lead dog for the Conn Smythe Trophy. I think if Florida wins tonight, and let's say it's a 3-1, a 4-1 type result, even if Bobrovsky gives up 2 goals, maybe even 3, but he stops a fair amount of shots, because the Conn Smythe Trophy is a reflection of the entire playoff tournament. I think people always get a little bit confused or have this assumption or belief that it's just a reflection of how that individual performs in the final. It is not. I mean, clearly you have a good opportunity to swing the vote by by going hero mode in the cup final. But the votes are already probably being tabulated. Maybe some folks have already submitted their vote. Who knows? So everyone's looking at the totality of the Stanley Cup playoffs, and you've got enough evidence to put Bobrovsky at the top of that list in terms of candidates. You know, you got a guy who has gone through Swayman against Boston, right? Great goalie, Igor Shesterkin. Wouldn't say he outplayed Igor, but his team obviously advanced, and he was a big part of that. So the fact that Florida has beat 3 impressive teams, Bobrovsky's stats maybe not as impressive as they were through the first 3 rounds last year in the playoffs. I think he still has enough of a case where going into tonight, he's the odds-on favorite. Obviously, people have been saying, could it go to Barkov? Could it go to McDavid, even in a losing cause? I think the only chance McDavid has is if he goes absolute beast mode, not only tonight, but this series has to get extended to at least a 6th game. Like, as impressive as his numbers are, he just recently, or from the last game, he broke Wayne Gretzky's single playoff season assist record, which is just absolutely insane that he's breaking some of these Gretzky records that probably a lot of hockey fans never thought would be broken. But yeah, anyways, I think he needs to have 2 more huge games at least to at least kind of maybe balance out the votes, or maybe bring, the majority over to his side. There hasn't been too many times where the losing team, a representative or an individual from the losing team, has won the Conn Smythe. I think it's only happened a handful of times. So, yeah, and then I think with the Barkov case, I suppose if he gets 3-4 goals tonight, and maybe if it's a 6-5 Florida win type thing, and it's a blowout and Bob doesn't look all that great, yeah, maybe Barkov has a chance to win it. But I still think going into tonight, it's Bobrovsky's trophy to lose. But yeah, anyways, as I said, I'm picking Florida to win the cup tonight, and that should conclude the NHL season. But for us Leaf fans, we know the season is just getting going. Talking about next season, where we're going to be going right into the NHL draft, June 27th, June 28th, and then a couple days, and then NHL free agency on Canada Day. So a lot going on. It's going to be really exciting to kind of see, it's already, we're hearing all the conversations pick up on who the Leafs might be looking at. And as usual, I think it's always a little bit frustrating because you're hearing all these names, pretty much all the top targets. Could the Leafs be interested, or the Leafs are interested, and the player would love to play in Toronto? So you get all this kind of talk, and you get all the talking heads, the Darren Dreggers, the Elliot Friedmans, the Nick Kyprios, Overdrive. I actually have a clip from those guys, the fellas on Overdrive, that I'll play for you in a little bit, talking about Mitch Marner. Big surprise. But yeah, you get all this banter from all these reporters and people who cover the team. Could they be in on this player? And it's like, yeah, I mean, I guess it makes sense. So you got me hooked. Like, I'll pay attention to whatever you're selling in terms of the likelihood of player X being a possibility for the Maple Leafs blue line next year. But there's only so much cap room that they have available. And until we see a Mitch Marner trade or something like that, there's not enough flexibility to foresee the Leafs being able to get maybe more than 1, 2 maybe of the bigger names out there. And I think that would have to presume that they're not looking to retain or bring back Domi and Bertuzzi. Because I think if they're signing one or both of those guys, that probably takes them out of the running for even bringing in 2 UFA free agents, obviously outside of their own guys. So if they're bringing back Domi and Bertuzzi, I'm not even suggesting that's likely. I think probably one of those 2 makes the most sense. I don't think they bring back both those guys and also fulfill their aspirations of upgrading the blue line, which we know is a high priority for Tree Living and the Leaf front office. So in my mind, signing both Domi and Bertuzzi really would take you out of the running for, if we're talking about the top free agent targets for blue liners. You talk about Brady Shea, Chris Tanev, Zadorov, Dylan DeMilo, Brett Pesce, Brandon Montour. If your goal, and this has been reported, I think Elliot Friedman was saying that a lot of teams are kind of thinking that the Leafs will get 2 of those guys. 2 of those names that I mentioned, they obviously are really going to make a hard push to upgrade that blue line. So if you're talking about 2 of those guys, I think even conservatively speaking, that would have you at around, 11, 12 mil right there. Like, you're not getting a Pesce or Montour for any less than 6 mil AAV, and probably some decent term coming with that as well. So if you're signing 2 of those guys, that then is like 12 mil of your 19 available. And again, that's conservatively in terms of the money you'd have to shell out to get 2 of those top guys. Montour, if he wins a cup, I don't think he's signing anywhere but Florida for less than 6, 7 mil even, right? We know players will take less to stay in a place like Florida with a no tax state. Obviously, that would make it more appealing for someone like Montour to remain in Florida. But so we're talking 12 of the 19. The Leafs, basically, if we don't count the likelihood of Easton Cowan or Fraser Minton making the lineup, the Leafs have basically 10 forwards on the books next year. That obviously doesn't include Domi, Bertuzzi. It would include Marner, obviously, until we hear otherwise. But that's 10 forwards right there. They only have 1 goalie on the books, which is obviously Joseph Woll. They have 4 blue liners on the books, which are Riley, McCabe, Timmins, and Benoit. So those are the only 4D that they have signed. We know they got a lot of UFA free agents from Labushkin, Edmondson, Gio, Brody. Don't know if any of those guys will be back. It sounds like there was mutual interest with Joel Edmondson. He's probably the only possibility from those guys. If you've heard kind of the reports, they're talking about Timothy Liljegren, the likelihood of him coming back. And the reports are that there hasn't really been much discussion between the 2 sides on a potential contract extension. He is an RFA, and that they basically have communicated that he is available. So if you go by that, and you trust that information, we only have 4 returning blue liners next year, and Connor Timmins is probably not someone that the front office foresees being in the opening night lineup. He might be a 7th. He might be, potential trade bait. Who knows? But you really need to bring in probably no fewer than 2 defensemen from this UFA class, right? And because really, in terms of development, talking about guys from the Marlies, not really much doing there. They do have college free agent that they traded for, Cade Weber. He could be an option. I'm sure he will get a decent look in training camp. He was with the team for most of the playoffs. But again, I don't think they envision him being in the opening night lineup either. So a lot of work to do to add to that blue line. So that's where I'm thinking if you have to get two of those top guys, that takes 12 of your 19 mil. And then you still have about 4 or 5 spots between your forward group, between your backup goalie or a starting goalie, depth defenseman. You basically only leave yourself with 7 mil to spend, which might be okay. Because then if you assume Easton Cowan, Fraser Minton make the team, if you think Cade Weber makes the team, if you think you're only going to, spend a minimal amount for your backup goalie, like if we're talking bringing back a Martin Jones type, that might only cost you 1.2 mil in or around there. So there's ways to do it. Like I think there's a lot of talk like, oh, all the speculation about the Maple Leafs again, adding all the top free agents, like Leaf fans are going to be disappointed. We very well might. It's possible that we might be disappointed again, that we, are left at the altar and these top free agents sign elsewhere. But this is kind of one of the first years since we've had the core group where we actually have a significant amount of cap space, I guess, relative to some of the other contending teams, right? Like 19 mil with 10 forwards already in the books, presumably our starting goalie already on the books for very cheap. It's not that crazy, guys. It's not that crazy to assume that the Leafs will be a big player in free agency for those guys like Pesce, Montour, Nikita Zadorov. Now, again, there's not a likelihood that they do get two of those top names, but to say it's not possible, I think is a little bit, probably you're drinking a lot of the haterade, if that's where you're coming from, that there's no way Montour or Pesce or Tanev or Zadorov would consider signing with the Leafs. I mean, I think we haven't seen for a while the Leafs actually being able to compete for the top free agents. They always went into every offseason because of what they committed to the core with very minimal cap space. And now between the cap going up and having expiring contracts, like having guys like Samsonov, Brody coming off the books, and now Domi, Bertuzzi, again, they may retain those guys, but right now, what they have available to spend is more than what they've had in the past few years, where, Dubas had to look at guys like Nicholas Kubel, and, he got obviously a very good value with Michael Bunting. But a lot of these free agent adds have very much been, minimal contracts, the veteran minimum, bringing someone on PTO. So it really hasn't been like Zach Aston Reese. These have been the kind of ads the Leafs have predominantly been making. Probably not due to choice, but just because of the constraints on the cap. Tree Living, if he chooses to focus only on the blue line, he has enough funds to go after some of the big targets. So that makes me kind of optimistic in terms of what we could see on July 1 or soon thereafter. And maybe some movement at the draft through trades. Could the Leafs look to free up additional cap room by moving someone like Järnkrok, David Kampf? I mean, those two guys obviously have certain value, but I believe they're highly replaceable for what they do. I mean, these guys, for what they're making, 2.1 Järnkrok, 2.4 David Kampf. God, that kills me every time I talk about it. Like, I don't know how Tree Living was able to justify that extension. That was kind of his first move when he arrived in Toronto, re-signing David Kampf 4 years, 2.4. That's just crazy town to me. So maybe there is an option to move one or both of those guys. That seems more like a pipe dream because who's taken either of those contracts, right? So I'm hopeful, but not exactly expecting that to happen. But just presenting the possibility of more cap room being freed up. Like Timmins could be a guy they move to. 1.1 million or in or around there. Not going to free up a ton of money for you, but every little bit counts. And if they do have the desire to go after a couple of the big names, you could easily see them being able to push their available spend over 20 mil, which allows you to kind of, I think, play with all the other top teams in terms of, recruiting the top free agents. Like, we know that Maple Leafs are always a top free agent destination. Are they the number one destination like they may have been before the salary cap or before kind of all these, political implications and tax situations? Probably not. But I still think they're a top 3 or top 5 free agent destination. I think you've got, obviously, with Florida, Tampa, Vegas, obviously presenting for a player in terms of their take-home pay. Those 3 places are probably as appealing as any. I think Nashville would be in that mix as well. And then you have, obviously, a lot of players who would love to play in big U.S. cities, LA, Chicago, New York. So, yeah, I mean, you could easily make the argument the Leafs aren't in that upper echelon of, once a guy becomes a free agent, it's Toronto or nobody else. No, there's a lot of competition out there. And I think that's where, when they had minimal cap room available to spend, they weren't really seen as a great destination, because these players would have to take significantly less money to sign a contract with the Maple Leafs. Whereas now, I think the Leafs can at least present a number that is competitive, right? I mean, obviously, if Montour is a guy that they're looking at, Leafs probably have to offer around 8 if Florida is going to come in around 5.5 or 6. Like, if Montour is saying, look, I want to stay in Florida, but my priority right now is to get paid. I've won a cup, so I'm willing to come back home to Toronto, but Florida is giving me 5.5 or 6 mil. To come to Toronto, I need that number to at least be at 8 mil. And then, I don't know, like, could the Leafs go that high? For Montour, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't go to 8 mil, but there's probably a number around 6 to 7.25 times 5 or 6 years that I think could work potentially, but we will have to see. So that's kind of where my view is on free agency and the Leafs' likelihood of making a big splash. There was more talk about Bertuzzi discussions, that there's still kind of a appetite on both sides to get a deal done. So we'll see where that goes. One of the Vancouver Canuck podcasts, Donnie and Wally, I believe, they were mentioning that they believe the Leafs have a strong interest in both Dakota Joshua and Nikita Zadorov. Dakota Joshua looks like he's done in Vancouver, won't be re-signing. So that's a guy that I think the Leafs should be looking at, and probably are. I think Nikita Zadorov has expressed a desire to remain in Vancouver, but the fact that they haven't agreed on anything yet, yeah, there's still some time there. But I think Elliot Friedman said he didn't think there was a great chance it could happen, but that he's also heard that don't I guess assume that Vancouver is out just yet. So we'll see how that plays out. In terms of other players the Leafs might be looking at, it's been the typical, Brett Pesce is going to be a target. Could Chris Tanev be an option? So I don't think there's really much in terms of leans or updates. I think the Leafs are trying to take care of their own barn, figure out, like, Domi and Bertuzzi, can we get a number that we can agree on before July 1st? Or do you guys need to see what else is out there before we can come to terms on a deal? Which, if you recall, last year, the Leafs were very close to getting a deal with Dumba, right? Defenseman Matthew Dumba. And they obviously weren't willing to go as high as what Dumba was asking for. And of course, we know how that played out. The Leafs went to sign John Klingberg for the money they were offering Dumba, which obviously was a terrible signing. But Dumba then, I guess, overvalued himself or, misunderstood the market for a player like himself and ended up basically taking, I think, around the same or less money with Arizona on a 1-year deal. So, I think there's blame on the player, but also with Tree Living, he's got to, negotiate with the players that he wants and make sure he can sell them on the idea of being a Toronto Maple Leaf. Obviously, he didn't do a good enough pitch to convince Dumba to take less, but we'll see if he's able to do that with either Domi, Bertuzzi, or any of these other free agents. So, yeah, could be a very exciting offseason for the Maple Leafs, and normally is, but I think with finally having some cap room, I think we're in for a little bit more excitement. I say this every time we come on here, but if you are looking to either make a comment, jump on here live with me, would love to have you aboard. So just drop me a note in the comment box and I should see it right away. And I can send you a link so you could come on, either ask a question or make a comment on what you think the Leafs might do or any other thoughts you've got, hockey related, if not Leaf related. All right. So next topic, and I'm going to tee up a video. I'm sure most of you watch or on the radio, you listen to TSN Overdrive. I find the three guys to be the most entertaining podcast or show available in terms of Leaf content. Obviously, they don't just do Leaf content, but, between them in terms of the drive at home time slot, you've got Kipper and Bourne at 3:00 and then Overdrive at 4:00. I love the Kipper and Bourne show too, because obviously when the Leafs are actually playing, they really focus a lot on Leaf content. They do a little bit more of a deeper dive than you might get on Overdrive, because Overdrive does a lot of other content. They talk, everything from football, golf, baseball. They cover it all. Whereas Kipper and Bourne is obviously just hockey. So two great shows, but Overdrive I just find for entertainment value. And then for what you see here, just a very honest takes in terms of not pulling any punches, not trying to sugarcoat things because it might upset the organization, talking about the Maple Leafs, but especially O-Dog and Brian Hayes, who you're here in a minute here, see and hear actually. I think they just had a very good thought process on the whole Mitch Marner situation. So let me get that queued up
Portion
here.
of the fan base, the media, I can't speak for everyone, I can speak for us on this show, have concluded that these guys are all great players. This has been a very good run. They're a great regular season team. But I'm not a believer that if you put that much money into three skilled forwards who all have the same disposition on the ice, none of them play like Kachuk, none of them play like Bennett, none of them play like Draisaitl, like bring contact on, I'm a beast, come get some. None of them play like that. I don't think you can win a cup like that. That's my opinion. But
Can't
my
win a
opinion,
playoff series.
Exactly. But within the building of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, they have proven through their actions they don't see it that way. And whether it's Tree Living, my sense would be it would be the man higher than that. Brendan Shanahan's been here for a decade. Brendan's take has been to keep the guys.
Okay. So if you want to get the full video there on my TikTok channel or account, you can find it there on my Leafs Talk channel. I've got kind of not the full video because it was basically a 14-minute discussion, if I recall correctly. But there's about 2 minutes that I kind of clipped there, and you just got to hear from both of them. So I think what I took away from that, and I obviously feel pretty much the same way Brian Hayes and Jeff O'Neill do about the situation, where it's very difficult to understand or, represent from a fan side this perspective. That would be, find a way to get Mitch Marner signed because he's a great player. That's what the Maple Leafs should do. Basically, what Brian Hayes was getting at, and where I'm at too, is how can you as a Leaf fan And if you, I think Steve Dangle also had a similar take too. Obviously, a little bit louder expression of his point of view, but you can definitely find that clip on Twitter. I think there's a lot of people in this fan base, and it might be finally the majority that have come around to the idea that you need to make a significant change. And it probably has to be Marner. And as Jeff O'Neill said, you're not saying that Mitch Marner is the problem and he's the one guy that needs to go. And if you move him, you fix everything that ails this team. And then they find a way to get over the hump and win a cup. That's not at all what I think too many people are saying. There might be pockets of delusional Leaf fans who feel that way, but I think the majority of level-headed and passionate Leaf fans like Brian Hayes, and I'd like to include myself in there, I think the majority of those fans feel that based on the timing of obviously Mitch Marner's contract coming up after next season, he is the guy that needs to go in order to make any of this feel like it has potential to be successful in terms of this whole group core running it back. If you do like run it back one for one, every single player that you had last year and prior years, in terms of the core group, like I don't see how you could look at it and say, yeah, that might work. That might finally work. As long as we avoid Boston, Florida, or Tampa Bay, or the Rangers or Carolina now, I think we could push through with this group. Like, I can't get behind that. And it just pains me when I see on Twitter or even on my TikTok channel, so many fans just like getting so up in arms about the notion that trading Marner could help the team. They're like, oh, how can you say it's Marner's fault? Like, tell me what Nylander or Matthews are doing or Riley's doing that make this team that much better. Like, first of all, it's not really about that. As I said, it's more about Mitch Marner. His contract ends next year. I myself, if you've listened to prior episodes or if you catch me on Leafs Talk, I've been one of the ones who's kind of, slamming my fist on the table with different expectations on signing Nylander before they did it. I was not a fan of giving him an 8-year, $11.5 million contract. If I had my choice and there was an 8-year, $11.5 million extension on the table with Mitch Marner, I'd prefer that. That would have been the better option for me. But the front office decided that Matthews and Nylander were the two guys they were going to move forward with. John Tavares' name gets thrown out a lot too. Like, why are you trading Mitch Marner? Trade Tavares. He's not as good as Marner, and he's older and he's not playing well. Sure, but we're talking about trading, where Mitch Marner actually has the ability to return something of value. John Tavares, even if he was going to waive his no movement, which seems like a door is closed on that, you're not going to get anything for him. You're probably going to have to pay a team to take him almost, right? At full value, full AAV. Whereas with Mitch Marner, I'm realistic. I don't think you're going to win a Mitch Marner trade, which is also one of the elements that I think a lot of Leaf fans get up in arms about, because they say, well, if you're not going to get me Connor McDavid, or you're not going to get me Kucherov or Panarin in a Mitch Marner trade, then you can't do it. If you're trading Mitch Marner and the return you get doesn't make you better today, don't do it. And it's like, but hold on. What is better about how is this team better if you bring Marner back, let's say after next year at 12.5 mil? What gives you the hope that this team can get over the hump if you're now paying Matthew 13.25, Nylander 11.5, and for argument's sake, let's say Marner at 12, okay? Which I think is probably less than what he's looking to sign for at this time, right? He might take less if he goes to a Vegas or a Tampa Bay, no tax state, but I think if he's going to get a deal done with the Maple Leafs, he's not leaving a penny on the table. And to me, that probably is around 12, 12.5. Maybe a little bit more. He didn't take much less than Matthews the last time they sign their extensions. So are we to believe that he's going to take $1 million less than Matthews now? I don't know. Or that he won't expect to get at least $1 million more than Willie Nylander, who throughout their career, he's definitely outperformed. Obviously, Nylander had an amazing year last year. Great timing. But over their careers, Marner's been the better performing player. So, yeah, you're looking at 12.5, 12 mil if we want to use that number as a reference point. But I don't see a path forward for this team to have elevated success. And to me, that has to be, okay, can we see this team win a cup, have a deep playoff run with that same group? And I can't, because when I was talking earlier about like, hey, the Leafs have cap room and they could be bringing in someone like a Pesce, maybe two of Pesce, Montour, Zadorov, Tanev. Like, you're not doing that long term if you're signing Marner to an extension this summer around 12 or 12.5. And I get it. Tavares' contract comes off next year. So you probably could do it. But then what does the rest of the team look like? Like, you can hold on to Marner, extend Domi, Bertuzzi, also get Pesce, Tanev, Zadorov, Montour, like two of those guys. I mean, you can't do all that. And then what is your solution to net? Wall's a great solution for next year if he can stay healthy, because he makes only like $760K or something. But he's going to need a new contract. If he performs next year, he's going to get a decent deal. Or the Maple Leafs will have to go hunting for a goalie, which will also cost them some money. Top goalies in the league make anywhere from $5 million to Bobrovsky's at 10.5. So if you want a guy like that, assuming they're even available, you're going to have to pay up there too. So I think one of the things that like Brian Hayes brought up there that really, has been something that I've been saying a lot as you watch these Maple Leaf players and these Maple Leaf teams struggle to advance in the playoffs. You can't expect that all of a sudden Mitch Marner, Nylander, Austin Matthews, even Morgan Riley are ever going to look like some of these core players from other teams. They're never going to play and win the battles and, take a team on a deep run like those guys like Matthew Tkachuk, Barkov, Sam Bennett, Montour, Ekblad. Like, these guys play the game differently. And I get it. If you want to look at just the points, you could be like, oh, well, like Tkachuk and Reinhart, Verhaeghe. I mean, these guys haven't done like that well in terms of point production, but it just in terms of the on ice performance, like how they battle for pucks and what they bring to the table. Even the Oilers, who are probably going to lose tonight in a cup final, McDavid, Draisaitl, Hyman, Nugent Hopkins, Bouchard, Ekholm, like, if you're watching the games and really watching the games, you can't say like, oh yeah, I've seen Riley or Nylander compete for a puck like that. Marner, never. It just doesn't happen. So those guys as a collective group, the Leaf core I'm talking about now, are not going to get it done. Like, if you want to believe that the Easter Bunny is real, fine. Then maybe you're part of the group that could believe that this Maple Leaf core will get it done. Like, to me, that's honestly how far-fetched it is that you bring the same group back. And again, we're not talking about the Domis and Bertuzzi, the more supporting cast players. We're talking about the core four, call it core five with Riley. You bring all those guys back next year, knowing the money that all of them make in terms of percentage of the total cap, you will not win. You will not win. I'm talking about deep playoff runs here. That I can't see how that occurs, because we've seen for 8 years that it doesn't work. And there's always going to be excuses to why it didn't. The Leafs had a tougher opponent, and that team ended up going on to get to the cup final. Well, the path isn't going to get that much easier. There's no divisional realignment coming where the Maple Leafs get to be in the Western Conference. So we know Boston's always going to, if they don't have success, they're probably going to reload. Who knows who they're going after? but Boston's not going to be an easier out next year. This was the year to beat Boston if you had the right team. Leafs couldn't do it. Again, reasons why. There were some injury concerns, absolutely. But that seems to always be the narrative, right? Whether it's injuries, whether it's officiating, whether it's the power play, whether it's the goaltending, whether it's Sheldon Keefe was the issue. There's always something, but you always have to look at the constants of why they weren't able to push through. And yeah, I'm not only going to single out the core players, but at the end of the day, the way this team was built, the core had to do unreal things and play elite level hockey in pretty much every game in the playoffs for this team to have a chance. And they didn't even do anything close to that. Obviously, Matthews, Nylander, Riley had games, moments where they were elite, but I wouldn't say they had ever gotten to the point where you ever felt confident that, yeah, just hop on these guys' shoulders and they're going to take us on a deep run. We saw, obviously, 2 years ago with Matthews, how he performed, and Riley, that ended up being enough to basically pull us through to round 2. But there were 3 overtime wins in that series. So realistically, you could be looking at a team that still hadn't got out of the first round. And that you have to look at the core because those guys didn't do enough. Edmonton is built almost identically to how the Leafs are built. For the most part, average to okay, sometimes very good goaltending, a blue line that is not very intimidating. They've basically got 2 guys that play the entire game right now, in Ekholm and Bouchard, and not much forward depth. Like, Edmonton is not winning because of guys like Derek Ryan, Adam Henrique, Dylan Holloway, Corey Perry, Connor Brown, Sam Carrick. Like, these guys are interchangeable, and obviously Knobloch has basically brought them in and out of the lineup, so he feels the same way. It's like, yeah, sure, this guy might give me a better penalty kill effort. This guy might have more energy or be more physical, so that's what we need in this particular game. But yeah, he just kind of calling a different number every game with those depth forwards. But what has remained a constant for the most part, and obviously it hasn't done as much in the final because of the opponent, but through the first 3 rounds, McDavid, Draisaitl, and Bouchard specifically, and Zach Hyman, were in on every single goal. Had they not been as dynamic as they were, Edmonton would have gone out, and maybe not round 1 because the Kings were pretty bad, but they probably would have lost to Vancouver. And these core players willed them to the Stanley Cup final where they're at right now. So I get it. You can blame other things. The defense wasn't good enough in the past. Freddie Anderson, Jack Campbell, Samsonov haven't been giving us good enough goaltending. But have a look at what the power play did against Boston. Like, pathetic. If those guys, if those core players were guys that you want to keep or you keep having faith in, you had to see something by now. You had to see more than what we've been given in terms of performance, production, contributions, all that jazz, right? And we haven't. So, long story short, very long story. I think where Brian Hayes was going, I feel the exact same way. I feel that there needs to be a change, and O-Dog even called it out as well. It's like, it's not about not liking Marner, not thinking he's elite. It's more about you can't win. You can't win with this group. And I think the sooner the Leaf front office acknowledges that, and obviously we're all talking and speculating, they may have. I mean, Marner is probably not getting an extension on July 1st. So odds are they're at least open to pivoting, but we'll have to see, because we thought the same way with William Nylander when he didn't get a deal on July 1 last summer. But then they said, we don't really have any good offers in terms of a trade for him, so we're just going to overpay him. And again, I didn't like that move. But you can't double down on a mistake and sign Mitch Marner. Like, you can't do that because Mitch Marner, Nylander as your top two wingers, that doesn't inspire confidence that you will find a way to get it done and push through and have a deep playoff run. Not for me anyways, but very curious if you guys have any other comments. Drop them in the chat. I'll definitely see it even after we shut her down today. But yeah, it just feels like it's a broken record. There's always people like coming out of the woodwork to say, no, do it again. Sign Marner. You can't lose a talent like that. He's a premier offensive talent, two-way forward. He kills penalties. Somehow was nominated for Selke 2 years ago, which I still will never understand, but can't deny that fact. Yeah, enough people think like just run it back. And we also have a lot of fans who, any Leaf player who has played, there's that immediate desire to re-sign them. Like, I'd like to see Domi back at the right price. I'd like to see Joel Edmondson back at the right price. Bertuzzi, Dewar. But I'm not as like attached to these players as some Leaf fans seem to be, right? There's so much of like, yeah, we've got to get Domi, Bertuzzi sign and get Edmondson, Lyubushkin back. Like, why would we bring back something that clearly didn't work? And again, not blaming Bertuzzi, not blaming Domi, not blaming Lyubushkin or Edmondson. Reality is, as a whole group, and now I'm talking about the whole team because I think we did enough discussion on the core and how I don't think that they can get it done. But that whole team didn't get it done. And even if Matthews and Nylander and Joseph Woll were healthy enough and we could have got past the Bruins, we know what would have happened against Florida. That would have been over in 4, maybe 5 games. So this team cannot get it done. So don't bring back everything. Don't bring back every player that made, somewhat of a contribution. Like, if you can get rid of some of what ails this team, and that's players that either don't tilt the ice, like talked about, like Yarncroke and David Kampf, I don't think you are worse off by bringing in someone on like a PTO, like a low contract number. Like if you said, hey, no Yarncroke next year, but we'll have Easton Cowan, I'd say that's an upgrade. There's nothing that Yarncroke or David Kampf do that you can't find for much cheaper. Like if it's penalty killing you're looking for, yeah, you can find guys in the UFA market that do a better job than David Kampf and Yarncroke do. If it's, we need a guy who wins faceoffs, you can find someone in UFA who can do what David Kampf does in the dot. And that's win 51 to 52% of his faceoffs. Okay. So point is, I think Leaf fans always get very attached and fixated on any player that puts on the Leaf jersey. And they're like, oh, I love this guy. He must be doing something great because the team is winning games. This team has won games because of what the core has been able to do during the regular season. And that's fine. You can say those are, or I want to keep 2 or 3 of those guys in the core because if we can build around them, I think we can win. But to say I want all of them back, like that, just crazy talk, crazy town. So hopefully that's where the Leaf mindset is. And again, go on my Leafs Talk channel because there is a little bit more of that overdrive clip. And they started talking about how, yeah, I mean, this is what the fans believe, but we haven't got any indication that Shanahan especially feels the same way in terms of, yeah, it's time for significant change. Because so far, and obviously Tree Living is the guy who signed them, but it could have all been coming from Shanahan's pushing. Sign Matthews, sign Nylander. No one's going to argue about the Austin Matthews signing, at least I hope not. But the William Nylander one, for the money that they paid him, yeah, there probably would have been a better path towards building a better team that didn't involve Nylander here at 11.5. But what's done is done. So I think it just kind of, we have to wait and see if the Leaf brass truly feels the way that I've kind of described it. And maybe, not many of you feel the same way, but I feel there's a lot of Leaf fans out there that just have lost interest and they're like, yeah, wake me up when you do something different, because running it back ain't something that I'm excited to watch, because we know what will happen. This group will find a way to make the playoffs because there's a lot of terrible hockey teams in both conferences that probably won't be significantly better next year. So is it easy to see the Maple Leafs with this same group making the playoffs again and getting between 100 and 110 points? Definitely not. But that doesn't interest me anymore. Like, yeah, that feels good in February and March, but if you're going to get the you-know-what kicked out of you in the playoffs, like, now's the time where you got to make those changes to see if you can get a different result. Because, yeah, not to beat a dead horse, but I just don't see the result being any better. Forget about it could look different somehow depending on your opponent. You might win one round, but better in terms of at that bar that I think Leaf fans should have right now, which is basically cup or bust. This team needs to find a way to get that done. I don't see how that result, how that particular expectation happens, bringing back the same players. And on that note, I will sign off. But yeah, definitely appreciate everyone who's viewing here. Really appreciate the support. As I said earlier, drop any comments if you have any thoughts or anything maybe you'd like to see on a future show of the Leafs Lounge. And yeah, if you aren't already following me on my TikTok channel, Leafs Talk, would appreciate the follow. And you can join us. We do lives right now with kind of going into off-season mode, probably more like every 2, maybe 3 nights. But we definitely ramp things up when things get closer to the NHL season, and then we're full go pretty much lives every night. So would appreciate the follow there. Looking forward to chatting with you guys soon, and enjoy Game 5. Lord Stanley will be in the building. Hopefully we see it being presented, or I guess if you're a supporter of Edmonton, you're hoping we get a Game 6. So enjoy it, guys, and we will talk soon.